Okay, so now that we have the favorite list complete, what we now want to do is introduce the unit tests so that our code is robust and tests for functionality of the application. So in our destinations folder, I'm going to create a new folder within here named underscore tests. And in here, I'm going to create a new file saying index.test.tsx, like so. So what I want to do is bring in a few of my imports first of all. So I'm importing React from React. We will be using render, screen, and wait for from React testing library. We will also be importing our component from the same folder above and also the user event. So when we click on a button, we want to test the functionality for that as well. So what I want to do is create a describe block in here. So describe like so, and this will be named destinations. And in here, what we want to do is create an after each. So this will mean that after each render that we do, we want to do a cleanup. So after each takes in a callback, and in this callback, we want to run jest.clearMock. So jest dot, and then we have access to a few properties from jest. So jest.clear all mocks like so. And then I'm just going to put a comment in here saying cleanup on exiting. So this is after everything is done. So for each test, we want to do a cleanup. So now that's out of the way, we want to run our tests. So we want to do a test block, and this first test is going to check for the on initial load, the loader is displayed. So that's when we load the page, we want to see the loading text. So in here, what I want to do is first of all render my component. So render, and this is from testing library. And then in here, we want to render the destinations. So we want to render this component over here. So now if I save, we have two tests passing because the destinations component is now rendering on the page. So now what we want to do is get access to the loading text. So const of loader is equal to screen or get by text, and this is going to be case sensitive, so it doesn't matter what the case is, upper or lower. So forward slash, and this time it's going to say loading because that's what should be loading initially, and then we want to do a slash I here, and after this we want to expect that the loader is in the document. So expect loader to be in the document. So now if I save, this loader is now in the document, and to test that this is true, if we do a not before, so this means that we should not have the loader in the document. So now the test should fail if I save, and as you can see it fails, and if I hover over, it does say here it found the text of loading inside. So we now just need to remove this from here. And now I'm just going to copy this and run another test underneath. And now this test is going to render the trending destinations list. So I'll just bring that in here. So now what we are doing is when we render destinations, there is a period initially where the loading text appears. So what we want to do is we want to do an async function this time because we are fetching data, and when that promise has resolved, we then have access to our API data. So we just need to wait for that to happen. So once we render our destinations this time, we want to first of all pass in async here in our test block, and we want to get access to the role of list, so get access to the LIs. So instead of the loader this time, I also want to test for the trending destinations list to be in the document. So that is the initial list of all of the cities. So const trending destinations is equal to screen dot get all by role. So this it means that we are getting it by the role. So for a UL, the default role is a list. So if we get by all by role of list, and we want to access the first list, so this will be the index of 0, like so. And now what we want to do is expect the trending destination to be in the document. If we just copy this and paste it in, And I'm just going to delete this because this is not needed. And if I now save, this test has now failed because if we hover over it, as you can see here, it's still showing as loading because initially what happens is when we render the HTML, the loading state is triggering the loading p tag here. So what we need to do is await for the list to be in the document. So the way to do that is if we wrap this in an await and then wait for, and this comes from React Testing Library, and this has a callback in here. So await for, and all we need to do is move this into this block over here, and if we delete this space and now save, this test should now pass. As you can see, it is passing. So now that test is passing, we also want to check for the favorites list to be rendering now as well. So if we just copy this and underneath paste this in, and this time instead of trending destinations list, it's going to be our favorites list, like so. And then we want to access the first index this time, so not the second index, should I say. And this time we will rename this to favorites list. So essentially, we want to have two lists in our document. So now if I save, another test that we want to do is we want to check the initial text in our favorites list is the text of nothing is added to your list yet. So if we just copy this and underneath paste it in once more, and this test name will be renders the initial no favorites text. So that's the initial text that we render on our favorites card, like so. So all we need to do here is define a constant and in our await for, so this will be initial favorites text, and this will be screen dot get by text, like so. And then the text we want to grab is nothing added to your list yet. So if we just bring that in, and then we want to expect that this is in the document. So now that test has passed also. So now what we want to do is check to see if the correct flight list data is being rendered in the document. So I think Gwemborough was one of them, so we will access that one. So in here, I'm just going to name this as renders correct flight list data. And this is async. We render the destinations and then we await for this const of Gwemborough. So I'm just going to bring this in and then we want to expect that to be in the document. So if I just copy this, bring this in here, and this is just to test that the relevant information is being passed in correctly. If I was to delete this and just render this out, this will now fail and it will tell me why it's failing. So if I hovered over, as you can see, there's nothing called Gwen error in the document, but there is Gwen Borough. So if I copy that, paste that in and save, we now are seeing that this is rendering correctly. And if I hover over here, this is not resolving, so I just need to resave again. And now the tests are passing. So we want to add one more test in here that tests the functionality of the buttons. So underneath here, this is where we will use the user event. So the last test is, so when we select a trending destination, then it gets added to our favorites list here. So what we want to do is we want to get access to Gwemborough. So we'll keep this example. And then when we click on Gwemborough, we want to then add this to our second list, so our favorites list. So if we have Gwemborough here, what I want to do is get Gwemborough and then click this. So user event dot click of Gwemborough, like so. And then what I want to do is get access to my favorites list. So that's this second list here. So if I just copy this one above and paste this in underneath. So const favorites list, screen get by all of the second list that we have. And then what we want to do is write an expectation in here. So expect our favorites list to have text content and this should be the Gwenborough text content. So I'll just bring this in over here. Now, if I save, we should get an error here. The test will pass, but there is an error saying you avoid using side effects within a wait for callback. So what we need to do is almost refactor this test over here. So what I'm going to do is move this above into the above block over here and remove this wait for here because it's saying don't use that. But then what we will have is an issue because the loading display will show. So now if I save, this test is now failing because the loader is showing. So now where I've declared my const of Gwembra, what I now need to do is wait for Gwembra to be rendered onto the page. So what I do here is something similar. So instead I want to await. So if I just bring this down, so inline await and then wait for, like so. And inline I want to do a callback in here. And now I want to get access to my screen.getByText here, like so. And this should fix the issue. But because it is async and we are using wait for, we shouldn't be using getByText, but it will suggest another one for us. So if I save and hover over it, so it says here, prefer find by text query over get by text, and you can read this in React Testing Library docs. So all I'm going to do is change this. So find by text. Now if I save, I have no errors. And as you can see, the test is working. So with this final test, what happens is initially we are fetching data from the API. So therefore the loader is showing. We then need to access something in the list. For example, this is rendered out on the list from the API. So Gwemborough, if we then click onto that, we then need to access our second list. And in our second list, so our favorites list, we then have the text content of Gwemborough in here. So now just to test that this is working fine, I'm just going to delete the first character in here and add an E in instead. And now if I save, the test, as you can see, is now failing. It's telling me it's received Gwemborough instead of what I've passed in here. So all we do is copy this and paste it in here like so. And now, as you can see, all of the tests are passing in our units and the project is now complete. I hope you enjoyed this build and learned a lot from this video. Please like and subscribe, and I look forward to seeing you soon.